Welcome, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Matt. I'm so honored to represent this technology, which I'm still learning about, and I think we all are. We're always going to be students to the incredible history and deployment of this technology. My name is Ryan Pickering, and when I got involved in nuclear, I was really upset at renewable energy, and I spent my whole career in renewables, and I felt betrayed. But over the last few years, I've really been thinking about how to combine those things. So it can be a controversial subject. I know people have a wide range of feelings about renewables. People have a wide range of definitions for renewables, and I look forward to sharing my research over the past 2 years. Here's my most recent bio, I suppose. I fashion myself as an energy policy researcher. I really see the connection between legislation and what energy actually gets built. And so I'm researching that and hoping to find a career in that space. Full disclosure, I am working with the Department of Energy and the US Department of Energy on a program called consent-based siting. It's a program to find an interim storage facility for used fuel. And I'm part of that with Mothers for Nuclear, which is another nonprofit in the pro-nuclear space. So, what I'm sharing today does not represent the position of the Department of Energy, though I do feel relatively aligned with them. So I'm also at UC Berkeley studying energy policy. I'm not a UC Berkeley student. They just kind of tolerate having me around, which I think is pretty cool. And I'm involved with our club called NICE on campus, which stands for Nuclear is Clean Energy. It's a student club that's working to legalize nuclear energy in California and the United States broadly. And it's the first chapter, but we are expanding the NICE Club to Cal Poly, MIT. And if your university is interested in starting a NICE Club, we can give you the logo and we can show you what our charter is, and you're welcome to create your own NICE Club. It's not a nuclear engineering club, it's more of a nuclear energy culture club. And we have a lot of sociologists and economists in that club, as well as nuclear engineers. As I mentioned, I spent 13 years in renewable energy. I built off-grid systems, I built rooftop systems, and I really loved it. And I built over 7,300 rooftop solar power systems in California in my career. And before I retired and got into energy more broadly, I've authored 2 reports, The Real History of Diablo Canyon. Everyone kind of knows it's a beautiful reactor. What a lot of people don't know is that it's built on a beautiful piece of land that's very important to the local indigenous group, and that indigenous group is still around today trying to reclaim that land. And I think that's an interesting dynamic in the backdrop of this very famous nuclear power plant. I also authored a series called Renewables plus Nuclear. And finally, I volunteer around town and try to stay grounded and don't go too crazy on nuclear all the time. It's tempting, but it seems like we've got some nuclear pros in the room, so I won't spend too much on the background. I just want to remind everyone that most people don't even know that we're talking about fission. And I think it's a fun thing to talk about, just like, hey, do you have an opinion on fusion or fission? And starting when you're talking with people about it, asking them questions. And oftentimes I recognize that they're like, well, we have fusion today, but fission is coming in the future. I get that all the time. And it's like, oh, yeah, oh, you're totally close. And like, anyways, so just to remember that the public has no idea what we're talking about, and we should talk to them more like our grandparents than like fellow nuclear nerds. That's just my opinion. We all know how light water reactors work. There's our beautiful Diablo Canyon in the central coast of California. Is currently the only operating nuclear power plant in California. We had a plan in the 60s and 70s to have 16 nuclear reactors in California. So we want to get back to that. And Diablo is this kind of missing link between those two visions. The last thing I'll say when I'm talking about nuclear is I love talking about the steam turbine train generators. I don't think these get enough credit. This is really where the electricity is happening. I think we constantly talk about reactors, and it's kind of abstract because what the public doesn't know is how electricity is actually made, how we take that steam and we make it into electricity with these giant spinning magnets spinning perfectly at 60 hertz. And I think that's a interesting um, tidbit that we can help educate the public with. So this is inside Diablo Canyon's turbine hall. And as you can see, it's quite a long building, and there's another matching 1.1 gigawatt turbine steam generator on the other side, and it's painted blue. And that's how they can tell them apart. One is blue, one is red. And together, they're the largest power plant in California. So, we're really grateful to have extended the life of Diablo Canyon to 2030. And our group's next goal is to just extend it the full 20 years. And we know that Diablo Canyon can run for another 40 years. Okay, that's my background. Once again, just talking about nuclear like we're talking to our grandparents. I try to return to the periodic table and put uranium in with everything else. And it's so cool, these actinides that uranium is a part of, and we can kind of get away from our fear of nuclear and get into more like, what is this stuff, and have that curiosity. Also, as an American, we have a complex history with the uranium mining. And thankfully, thanks to this new in situ technology, we can pull uranium out of the ground without having to dig traditional mines. So huge opportunity for people to change their perspective on that. Okay, and then finally, this is how I knew that like switching from solar to nuclear was a good idea for my career. It's just the energy density is incredible. And Credit Suisse published this graph. And I thought it was so cool. And right when I got into nuclear, I posted it to LinkedIn, which is my favorite social media. And I'm not going to say that it went viral, but it got 250,000 impressions. And that was like much more than I had ever received before. And I was like, whoa, I think the world might be ready to talk about uranium. Like, people are interested, especially people from my sector. A lot of these people in this photo are from renewable energy, and we know that renewables alone, it can't do it all. We can't get off fossils with just renewables. And so I think I'm trying to welcome in the renewables crowd and continue to make energy nonpartisan. We're almost getting into it here. I just want to share some of the publications that have informed my perspective. If I'm sure everyone on this call has already got electricity maps downloaded on their phone, but the hourly toggle really helped me understand energy at an intuitive level, and I trust that the public will be able to understand it as well. Also, What is Nuclear is a great resource, and worldnuclear.org. And then here are some of my favorite books. I loved Richard Rhodes' Energy. I love Stefan Kvist's A Bright Future, which was made into the film Nuclear Now. And finally, I have been reading in depth these reports called the Pathways to Commercial Liftoff, published last year by the Department of Energy. And that's what I'd like to share on this call. These are kind of the perspectives of the Department of Energy and how we can decarbonize our entire society. Okay, so this infinity logo, this is the logo of the Department of Energy's Liftoff reports. It's a series of reports, and I don't know who the artist is, but I think it's kind of cool. And here's our agenda. I want to talk about the challenge, the liftoff reports, and advocacy opportunities. The EIA is a US government organization that monitors all kinds of different energy stats. And they're known to be very conservative, and everyone disagrees with them. But this is currently on their website. This is what one agency of the federal government of the United States thinks energy is going to look like in 2050. And I think it's pretty sobering. Sad even, because renewables, nuclear stays flat, renewables grows a lot, and we stay on fossil fuels. And we hear a lot of politicians speak and everything, but the EIA, the Energy Information Agency, thinks that this is what's going to happen. So
I
we've got
assume
to work
they're
out
basing that off of current trajectory, would you say?
Yeah. Yep. And everyone is critical of the EIA. They're like, you're not taking into account all these things, but this is the aggregate of what they see. And this is also global, by the way. This is not the US. So the US could go 100% clean energy, and it wouldn't really it would impact this graph, but they're just looking at the whole world, right? And I think that's correct, right? We should be looking at, we all share the atmosphere, we all share these ecosystems and the biodiversity. So this is the challenge. But the Liftoff reports and the Department of Energy, they have a different perspective. They take that data and they show an enormous increase to renewables and nuclear by 2050 to achieve this. Now, do we get off fossils completely? No. But do we get off of coal completely? Yes. Do we reduce our consumption of natural gas significantly? Yes. Do we reduce our consumption of crude oils? Yes. So this is what the Department of Energy is trying to model to. I think when you see it like this, it helps people understand that there's just really only a few kinds of energy out there. And you don't have to be a energy modeler to understand this. Okay, great. So how do we do it? Well, I just want to show one more piece of data because I love it. This is what powers the United States grid. And I don't mean to be US centric here, but this is just one big grid. But you can see how these energy sources are interacting with each other. And I don't think we have to be scared of that complexity. This works every day, and the grid is kept in balance every day, and we hardly have any blackouts. And somehow we're able to balance supply and demand, and natural gas is playing a huge role in that. As you can see, natural gas just has this huge gas pedal on it that we can go up and down very rapidly. Nuclear serves as a base load similar to coal. Coal does more ramping, and then renewables kind of lace in there as well. So this is how a big modern grid is currently working. And we can imagine what it would look like if the nuclear line went up and some of the renewable lines went up and the natural gas and the coal lines went down. We could imagine that. And that's what's going to happen over the next 30 plus years. 100 years even. Okay, now we're getting into it. This is the Department of Energy Liftoff reports. If you want to read these reports for yourself, they are at liftoff.energy.gov. And you can see there are many subjects. Notably, the first report that the Department of Energy published was called Advanced Nuclear. So I gotta say, the Department of Energy loves nuclear. They might not have the perfect take on it all the time. I think they're, but they know that nuclear energy is necessary in a decarbonized grid. They know it. And I admire the bravery of a lot of the people on the DOE staff, especially the ones who came from renewables and kind of said, hey, I changed my mind on nuclear. It's pretty cool. So advanced nuclear is one of the reports, carbon management, clean hydrogen, industrialized decarbonization, long duration energy storage, and virtual power plants. You'll notice that wind and solar are not a report here. And that's because from the Department of Energy's perspective, they've already achieved commercial liftoff. They don't need a plan to get out of the gate. But things like advanced nuclear, because we're still at a standstill. I shouldn't say we're at a standstill, but more work is needed on the supply chain in order for us to really take off here. Okay, I'm going to be covering the Advanced Nuclear Report. So I want to show you what the federal government of the United States is thinking about nuclear. Once again, this cool logo here. And it reminds me of the Kurtzagat cartoon. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's kind of says that like, yeah, solar, wind, water, and nuclear can work together to fight pollution. And that's definitely the spirit of what they're trying to put down at the Department of Energy right now. Let's see. This is a 62-page report. And I gotta say, it's pretty easy to read. I'll kind of teach you how to read it. Here are some of the authors. I just want to shout all of them out because I think this was a really important work. And if you go to energy liftoff.energy.gov, you'll see there's even webinars attached to each one of these reports, so you can listen to the authors talk about this. I mean, the Department of Energy has put so much work into this report, into these reports, and they're kind of like, please listen to us. I haven't seen the view count on this, but it's not that high, and that's okay. But it's our job as science communicators to kind of like connect all these big pieces. This is Julie Kozaraki. She wrote the report. I think we all met her in New York at the Atlantic Council. She's totally cool, and she's a very, very intelligent person. Just talking to her, you're like, oh, so you're a smart person, you know? And what's cool, what I love about her writing is that she had studied some nuclear, but she really didn't have any perspective on it. She just came from the Boston Consulting Group, and she just read everything. If you read the works cited of her report, it's like every major publication on nuclear supply chain. And she just, with a fresh mind, read it and put together a report that if you talk to industry experts, they're like, yeah, that's pretty good. And she's coming out with a version 2 this year. So she's updating some of her. And I just have a lot of respect for people who work for like leave the private sector and go work for the government and give really good work. And I don't want to be jaded, you know, like and say the government can't do good things because I meet this woman, she's like, I felt a responsibility to try to help get American nuclear back on track. And so I wrote this. I was like, thank you. That's the kind of taxpayer dollars that I'm willing to spend, you know? And so just feel kind of proud of my country for doing that. So how to read the reports, it's really just a bunch of graphs and then Julie writing about the graphs. So you can kind of, I recommend reading the whole thing for yourself, but if you just look at the graphs, you've read the report. She's laid it out in this logical pathway of these different graphs. And I've screenshotted a couple of my favorite graphs that I think are really powerful, and I'd like to show them to you. Okay, here's the first graph of the whole report. And what's crazy is we talk about COP28 and the triple pledge and everything, but Julie Kozaraki was the first to call for a tripling. And she called for 200 gigawatts of new nuclear by 2050, which is exactly a tripling of the 100 that we have today. And here is her pathway of how to do it. She said, I'm not even going to start the timer until 2030. Like we've got the rest of the decade to get our ducks in a row, but we do need to commission some new nuclear in 2031. So the green is nuclear coming online. And what Julie's really focused on is make sure we get the ramp right. We don't want to just do nothing and then panic in 2045 and overbuild. And that's just going to, like, this is to her point of view, a sustainable growth path that's a steady state of 13 gigawatts of nuclear coming online per year. Okay, so I have some thought bubbles just to like help encapsulate. So this build out represents a 200% increase to current nuclear generation. Great. Okay, and then she really likes these timelines, like, and I appreciate that she's not totally rushed, but right now she wants to focus on getting a committed order book. We need more orders on the books. We don't need to start building them right now. We just need orders. We need to start doing the paperwork. And that means 5 to 10 new reactors by 2030. 25. Next year, the Department of Energy wants to see 5 to 10 new reactors. None of them have been announced yet. So we got our work cut out for us immediately. And then project delivery. So let's get those built by 2037 and like nail it, right? Like do a great job, build them all in 10, 12 years. And then stage 3, industrialization. Okay, now you scale workforce, scale supply chains, licensing capacity. Okay, so this is the hardest graph to understand. So I need everyone to have their thinking caps on, okay? These are two possible outcomes. And Julie's breaking energy down even simpler into 3 categories: variable, non-clean firm, and clean firm. Julie also said, if you can think of a better word for those, let me know, but I'm going to stick with clean firm for now and non-clean firm. So you have these 3 energy categories, and that, it makes sense, right? Variable is basically renewable energies. Non-clean firm is fossil, and clean firm is nuclear, hydro, solar plus storage, even natural gas with carbon capture, if that theory becomes reality. Okay, and now we have 2 possible futures. Now, both of these futures get us to a decarbonized grid. But the Department of Energy is trying to wink at us and say that one of them is better. Because on the left side, they're saying that we can power the whole grid with less energy if we scale up clean firm energy, the dark green. If we can scale it up and 5x our clean firm capacity, so that's tripling nuclear and adding more hydro, more geothermal. If we can do that, then we don't need to build as much wind and solar. Because wind and solar is great, but when you overbuild it, it becomes more expensive. And we have to keep the energy affordable in this country, or there will be dire consequences, as we all know. Now, if you see on the right side, Julie is modeling, what if we don't scale up nuclear the way we want to? What if we only, and I mean, I should say, what if we scale it 3.5 times and not 5 times? So she's assuming we're going to be very successful, but not super successful. She's showing that we're going to have to build so much more wind and solar to make up for it. And I think that's this very interesting relationship that clean, firm energy has a different value and function on the grid than variable. We don't have to compare them apples to apples. They do different things. And the more clean firm you have, you can get away with a lot less wind and solar overbuild. And that's good for American ratepayers and the environment. Okay, so we'll come back to this slide, but it's a complex subject, but this is why Julie pushes so hard, because she doesn't want us to see us overbuild on renewables if we don't have to. So using nuclear to back up wind and solar leads to more efficient transition of clean energy. I know this can taste like sour grapes to some folks who don't like wind and solar, but I think that this is an effective message in the current atmosphere of energy debate. Okay, here are some of the reports that she models and pulls from. She's not the only one calling for a huge increase to nuclear energy. We've got a lot of different groups calling for it. Okay, yep. I loved this graph. This was a real jaw dropper. I mean, to see the Department of Energy identify nuclear as the most valuable energy source, it's amazing, And the only thing that they're saying it's missing is it's not cost competitive today. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And Julie gets into why. And I look forward to showing you that. But I think this is a really good way to think about energy. Is it clean? Is it firm? Low land use, low transmission build out, concentrated local economic benefits, additional applications like industrial heat, and cost competitive. And you can see that's what we need to work on. And even though None of us are giant nuclear developing companies, or maybe you are, I don't know. We can actually fix that. The people on this call can make the cost competitive today. We can make that dark green, and we're going to. And we're gonna make history. Okay. It was also amazing to see the Department of Energy show the land efficiency of nuclear. We talk about this a lot, but as you can see, we are very efficient when it comes to land usage. And if you want to break down environmentalism into, preserving wild spaces, obviously nuclear is like a cheat code for that. So makes me feel like I'm not taking crazy pills. Sometimes nuclear feels a little heterodox, but when you see the Department of Energy give us this kind of nod of approval, I think it's really powerful. Right. We also employ the most people and we pay the most. So we're advocating for an economy that pays professionals well. And I think that's awesome, with the most jobs and the most money. And a lot of tax revenue for local communities. And that's a whole nother subject. Okay. And then Julie really geeks out on this page, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but she's like, it's not just electricity, right? It's hydrogen, it's process heat, it's desal, it's district heating, it's off-grid power, it's craft propulsion for ships and space. So it's cool to see the Department of Energy just say, look, we're actually working on these things. This isn't just some Reddit forum where we're saying that nuclear could theoretically do all these things. These are proven technology pathways. And once again, I'd like to cite this a lot with people who are just new to talking about energy, is that electricity is only 20% of energy. I think that's a real mind-blowing concept. And that's true for most grids. It's true for the US, it's true for a lot of developing countries as well. Most of the energy we use is from combusting for heat and for transportation, so nuclear, we can't just decarbonize electricity. We have to deeply decarbonize our whole society, and nuclear is obviously going to help us big there. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. There's some different fuel types. I think we should geek out on that at some point. But in the short term, just know that there's a lot of different reactors and a lot of fuel types, and it's the US government is really looking carefully about making sure we have the right fuel to feed the right reactors. It's not just about building the right reactors, it's about having the fuel supply for those reactors. And the Department of Energy also thinks that we're going to have 10 designs across the US that are very popular. It won't just be like one big winner, and it won't be 100 different designs. It'll be something standardized, like 5 to 10. Speaking of Vogtle, this is a recent picture from Vogtle, Georgia, the US's newest nuclear power plant. And, I think it's going to be challenging for the US to do this again because it was so overpriced. But Julie really gets into how we could drive down the costs for any reactor, including this design. And what she says is, of course, the first reactor, she calls it a FOAC, first of a kind. Of course, the FOAC is going to be expensive. It's the first time you've ever done it. But you can drive down the costs by over 60% by what she calls learn by doing. Learning by doing. Standardization, all these things, yes, but all of that is solved with practice. And this is a proven construction concept. So with learn by doing, we can drive down the cost of all nuclear. That's the last slide I want to show from the Liftoff reports. Now I want to connect the dots. You guys are very smart. Stay with me. I got one more crazy concept to throw at you guys, and then we're going to talk about how it all relates to each other, okay? Does anyone recognize what we're looking at here? To me, it kind of looks like a nuclear plant, those towers. But it's not a nuclear plant. Yeah, yes, Matt. Can you tell me what this is?
Yeah, Eric beat me to it, but yeah, coal plant, and what determines that is the smokestack.
Yep, the tall, thin smokestacks. That's where the real pollution's coming out of. And so you can
Which,
always tell a coal plant from a nuclear plant, even if they have these big same steam towers.
uh,
Those are serving the same function, but they does it have these tall, skinny stacks trying to get that pollution way away from the people. And the second thing you can tell is does it have a big pile of coal next to it? And that's what you see at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so this is coal. This is what built the world, electrified the world, and this is what's currently powering still much of the world. And everyone's saying we need to get it offline, but it's like, how? How do we do that? We don't have the nuclear industry is still in diapers. Wind and solar can't spin giant turbine generators 24 hours a day. Natural gas is expensive and much smaller and limited by pipelines. How do we do this? Well, let me just show you a little bit more. Once again, sorry to be so US centric, but these are the current operating coal plants in the United States. So as you can see, we're still hooked on that. And I think it's pretty audacious that the United States would say to developing countries, oh, you can't have a coal plant, which is, look what we're doing. We're loving it. And China is building 130 gigawatts of new coal right now. So we need energy, y'all. Here's what the Department of Energy, there are 220 active coal plants in the United States, and they power 20% of the country. Coal powers about the same amount of the United States as nuclear does. We're kind of like tied. Well, here's the big plan from our government. We want to transition coal plants to nuclear plants. And they have published a report. And once again, it's so cool to read the work cited on that report because it mentions a bunch of groups we know that have that have also published on a coal to nuclear transition. So the federal government is listening to what their citizens are, citizen academics and energy modelers, and they're saying, yeah, this idea works. We could upgrade coal to nuclear. Okay, so here's what it would look like. This is these are all the nuclear plants in the US right now. And the red ones are active, the gray ones are inactive sites, and the yellow ones are proposed under development. And this map's a little old. Okay, now to add 200 gigawatts as to triple nuclear energy, here's what it could look like, just a random AI generated based on where the coal plants are. So we'd be going, from there to there. Now we could put a lot of those blue dots next to existing sites. That would be cool. You can just make very large, but it does have to be spread out to a certain extent. And thankfully, with these new transmission wires, we can send this energy a long way. So the nuclear doesn't necessarily need to be close to big cities and demand, but the closer, the better for the ratepayer. Okay, so once again, there's the coal plants. And here's what it could be to power 40% of our country or more with nuclear. That coal to nuclear transition is going to be a challenge, and I'd love to talk about that some more. But the good news is we're seeing nationally that nuclear energy is increasing its popularity. This is a relatively new poll showing that nuclear is a bipartisan, publicly supported concept. And I look forward to continuing that with you all